Fox Business Network bashed the Pope to no end this morning. Let's take a look.
As we're waiting for further proceedings here, I want to bring in our panel because, as I said, I do believe the Pope just walked right into the politics of climate change. It was a full-throated statement right there.
No longer a problem that can be left to a future generation. Very strong statement.
It was politics, was it not, Judge?
It's a hot-button political issue because this administration has chosen to address climate change administratively through the EPA rather than legislatively in areas that Congress go. It's very, very hot button.
I thought he had saved these comments for his address to Congress.
But he did not. That was a clear-cut statement on climate change.
He
right
also invoked Martin Luther King's 1963 I Have a Dream speech when he said about climate and development, we have defaulted on a promissory note. Now is the time to honor it. Mr. King's speech at that time was talking about basically jobs and discrimination against people of color. By the way, it's worth noting at this time that the unemployment rate for African Americans is still higher than 10%.
He did say that we had defaulted on a promissory note. I think
that's the reference to
that's what
the 1963 Martin Luther King.
He's taking Martin Luther King's words about treating people equally irrespective of the color of their skin and attempting to extrapolate it to the economy.
I was surprised at such an overt statement. Which I thought was a political statement of support for the President Obama, on climate change.
He's supposed to. I understand totally that in his view, fighting poverty is basically in the same trajectory as fighting climate change, because he sees the people being injured by climate change as being amongst the world's most poor. But what it is, he actually advocates in for less growth, a reversal of growth in the developed world to fuel growth in the underdeveloped world. How anti-development policies would help the poor of India or Africa nobody's, who knows, right? It's not coherent.
Tens of millions of people.
Of course.
You raise the price of energy, and what does that do to poor people in Africa, parts of Asia, Latin America? It impoverishes them. And the Pope is now advocating precisely those policies.
That's exactly right. It's hard to understand because it's incoherent.
Yeah, he's incoherent. Did you hear what Varney just said at the end there? He's like, the Pope is for policies that impoverish people. Unbelievable. Except everything he's said since day one that he's been in power has been the opposite of that. He's made economic justice and equality. Those are main things on his platform. Those are main things that he talks about all the time. Now, you might not agree with how he goes about getting those things done, but to say that he's advocating policies that will impoverish people, that's just objectively not true. And look at that, man. They have the nerve to just totally twist what his arguments are, because They said the Pope is against growth. He's advocating for anti-growth ideas. No, what he said is we shouldn't only focus on growth to the detriment of all other things. Like, for example, when you bring in the point of externalities, which is unintended consequences of a free marketplace, that's where you get pollution, that's where you get climate change, that's where you get a whole bunch of these problems, that's where you get paying people less than they can afford to live on. And the Pope is saying, hey, we can't only focus on corporate growth, because then that neglects all these other really serious problems. But notice how they flipped it, and they just said, he's anti-growth, to try to simplify, dumb down, and twist his argument to make it seem like he's some kind of a crazy person. And isn't it hilarious? Only on Fox Business would they not attack the Pope for things that I think are fair game to attack him for, like all the pageantry and the nonsense traditional BS where he's wearing a dress and people sing and it's a show, it's just goofy religious nonsense. That they're all cool with. Nobody says a word about that. But when he dares to say intelligent things about, hey, maybe we should treat people good and not fuck up the environment, they're like, unbelievable, I can't stand this guy. And then, finally, I love how obsessed Stuart Varney is with the fact that the Pope dared to bring up climate change in any way. He's like, he's bringing up climate change. How can he bring up climate change? This is politics. That's what he said. As if that's just like a brush aside. Like, well, that ends the conversation. It's politics. I can't believe he's talking about politics. He can't do that. But wait, you guys are in the party that always loved to marry together religion and state, so long as the religious figure is parroting your conservative horseshit. You've never said when it's a right-wing religious leader and they say something crazy, unless it's a Muslim, of course, then you'll attack. But if it's a Christian and it's a right-winger, you never say, politics, you can't talk about that, this is politics, you got to keep that separate. You never do that. Only when it's a somewhat liberal message do you go, politics, this is fucked up. And then they have the nerve to say he's stealing MLK's legacy to advocate for economic justice. They make it seem like, well, clearly MLK would be opposed to this. Do you know nothing about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? Not only did he care about racial equality and justice, he also cared about economic equality and justice. He was gunned down at a union protest. He was fighting for fair wages when he was gunned down. He's got quotes on all different things. For example, with the healthcare system, he says inequality in healthcare may be the worst form of injustice. The list goes on and on where he advocates for, hey, we need to have a living wage, so on and so forth. These are all things that Pope Francis agrees with. And he doesn't have to bring up MLK and misquote him to say he's on his side. MLK would have been on his side. But of course, the ignorance parade at Fox Business Network is endless, and here they prove it yet again.